Asatoma satkamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya, avirāvirmayeti, rudrayate takshinam mukham, tena mam pahi nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So today we begin the second chapter of the Gita. In the first three classes that we studied this first chapter together, we saw how the story begins, how the background to the story is set up in the first chapter, the reasons that Arjuna gives about why he doesn't want to fight. We saw how the word swajana, means my own people, comes again and again. That Arjuna had fought many battles and won them all. He was arguably the best archer in the world that time. So this was not his first battle. The only difference was that it suddenly struck him that this time he has to fight with his own people, swajanam. That's the Sanskrit word. Even that is actually not fully accurate. This was not the first time he was fighting his own people, but this was the first time it struck him as such. So we will see that there were occasions when he has fought his kind of own people before, but it didn't strike him as strongly as it does at this point. And so the first chapter ends with Arjuna laying down his bow and arrow and saying, I'm not going to fight, and just sit in a very dejected mood on his seat. And that's why the first chapter is called the Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's grief or despondency. Now, clearly, when Krishna gave this teaching, he didn't set it up into 18 different classes, and each class was one yoga. It wasn't like that. So it was when Vyasa, who put down the conversation that went between Krishna and Arjuna in words in the Mahabharata. So the teaching then got divided into these 18 sections, 18 chapters. Or in Sanskrit they call it adhyaya. And each of these chapters was given a name. Most of the names seem to match the different editions of the Gita you might find. Some of them are slightly different. But the first chapter in all the books is really Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And the word yoga here means, the root meaning of the word is the joining. That anything that takes us near to God, near to our spiritual ideal, that is yoga. Any practice, any way of thinking that takes us closer to God, that is yoga. So in this particular instance, right now Arjuna doesn't know what is to come. But in retrospect, when we look back, we see that this Arjuna's tremendous despondency and grief opened the door for Krishna's teaching. Because if Arjuna hadn't become depressed like this and had reacted in this way, there would have been no need for Krishna to give the teaching. So this tremendous disappointment at the kind of difficult situation in which Arjuna finds himself became a way, became a door opening for the teaching to be given. And that's why this is also called a yoga. And as we will see later, this kind of discontent or despondency or vishada, express it in any way you like, in some way or some form can be traced back to our own entry into spiritual life. Yes, disappointments we all have in life. Things not always go according to the way we planned them. But not every disappointment suddenly wakes us up to the importance of spiritual life. Sometimes when things are not going that well, people tend to pray a little more, visit the temples a little bit more. But then when things become all right again, then the urgency, the frequency to do all of that becomes less. So as I sometimes say, we think of God or spiritual practices as a kind of a 911 service. We don't call them every day just to say, how are you? We just call them only when there is problem. And so for many people who are not atheists or agnostics, who are good people, who see themselves as religious people, but religion isn't among the top priorities in their life. It becomes sometimes a top priority when they are going to a difficult phase. Now, that's not the kind of disappointment we are speaking about here. Sometimes the disappointment can be so deep that it is not something that will go away in a day or two. And later on, we will come to that later on in the Krishna's teaching, when he speaks about how 4 kinds of people turn toward God. And we will, when we study that verse, we will see that every one of them is disappointed in some way or the other. And in some way, it might be possible to look at our own life, that even though we might have been religious in one form or other from a very early or in life, when was it that I started taking spiritual life very seriously as something very important? Not just an afterthought, not just something I can do when I'm free or when I'm in the mood for it, but something that is an essential part of my life. And it might be possible, and all of us might have different entry points into spiritual life that way. But if you just boil them down, it will be in some form we are not happy with the way things are. This is not a perfect world, and no person in the world has a completely perfect situation. All of our life stories are different. There are some wonderful things in our lives. There are some things which we wish had been different or were better. But we will find that in all of these things, at some point, we realize that to get over the kind of the unsatisfactory aspects of our life, no worldly or secular solution is going to work. That there has to be some profound, deeper, or a transcendent way. That's the only way some of these intrinsic deficiencies in life can go. Because if things can be solved simply through legislation, then of course we must go out and be an activist. But we know, yes, activism is good. There are a lot of things that can be done through a good government, a good legislation, good social service. All these things are important. But there are certain things in life we find none of these external social or governmental supports can remove some of these very deep personal things. And therefore, we need a deep personal solution to that. And that's the kind of a solution Arjuna was in need of right now. in the Mahabharata, we have seen how these Pandava brothers, before they actually came to a point where the war became inevitable, we have seen there's a lot of hesitation. Everyone was aware that war is not a good idea. And at one point or another, especially these 5 Pandava brothers, they all had thought, let's try to get peace. And as we have seen already, they tried several ways of avoiding the war. And there is an instance in the Mahabharata itself when Yudhishthir, the eldest of the brothers, and Bhima, they also are saying, no, we don't want war, we want peace. And that time Krishna, not in as stronger words as he'll use and the long teaching he'll give to Arjuna, he just told them, you're not thinking correctly. See, all the efforts at peace have been done. As a Kshatriya, as someone belonging to the warrior branch of social structure, it is your duty to protect dharma, duty to do what is right. And therefore, your thinking is wrong. You shouldn't be thinking like that. And he just kind of exhorts them a little bit, and that solves the problem. Then they're okay. They said, okay, we accept. So that if he had taught the Gita to them, it would have been finished in maybe a 1 page. But Arjuna's problem is a lot deeper, as we will see now. So let's look at the very first verse, first and second. Together we can do them. Sanjaya uvacha tam tatha kripaya vishtam ashrupurna kulekshanam vishidantamidam vakyam uvacha madhusudanaha. Sanjaya said, to him who was thus overwhelmed with pity and sorrowing, and whose eyes were dimmed with tears, Madhusudana spoke these words. Very clear. Verse 2. Shri Bhagavan uvacha kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupasthitam anarya jushtamasvargyam akirtikaram Arjuna. The Blessed Lord said, in such a crisis, whence comes upon thee, O Arjuna, this dejection, un-Arya-like, disgraceful, and contrary to the attainment of heaven? Verse 3. Klaibyam asma gamav partha naitatvai upapadyate kshudram hridaya daurbalyam tyaktvottishta parantapa. Yield not to unmanliness, O son of Pritha, ill doth it become thee. Cast off this mean faint-heartedness and arise, O scorcher of thine enemies. So 2 verses. First thing to note is that everything that Arjuna said in the first chapter about how terrible war is and why it shouldn't be fought and so on, Krishna is totally disregarded that. He has not responded to that at all. He didn't say to Arjuna that whatever you said is wrong, war is a good thing, you should. He never says that. Because there is a lot of truth in what Arjuna says in the second half of the first chapter. War is bad, war is terrible, killing is wrong. All of that is true. What Krishna is pointing out here is this faint-heartedness, hridaya daurbalyam. What has happened to you? That you have become this kind of, something has weakened inside you. And it's a very powerful, irrespective of which translation you are reading, the force, the impact of the Sanskrit, what's here in the original, it's very difficult to bring it in the translation. These are pretty, almost humiliating, insulting words. And to say that to this greatest archer in the world, only Krishna could have said anything like this. So he says, in this crisis, whence comes upon thee this dejection, un-Arya-like, that noble people, people who have lived with some principles, never behave like this, disgraceful and contrary to the attainment of heaven. Because going to heaven, one of the things that is said in the books is that if you follow dharma, if you do the right thing, then the reward for doing what is right and what is good is, of course, going to heaven. That's a kind of a general way, although the conception of heaven and what it means might vary from one tradition to another. But there is a general agreement, irrespective of whichever tradition we come from, is that a good action will yield to some happy result. A bad action will lead to some painful result. And that happy result, or some form of a reward, gets expressed as a form of heaven. And this suffering and kind of a punishment for doing what is wrong gets expressed as a form of hell. And of course, as I said, there are many different ways these terms can be understood. So what he's saying is that you came to the battlefield to do what is right, to protect dharma. This could have taken you to heaven. And now, whereas this mean-heartedness, faint-heartedness has come to you, yield not to unmanliness, son of Pritha. Pritha is the name of Kunti, and he is the son of Kunti. And so he is called a son of Pritha. It was kind of interesting in many of these Sanskrit ways of addressing these people. Sometimes the names of the parents will come, and sometimes by grammatical rules, there may be a little bit of a... For instance, he clearly is saying son of Pritha here. But in other places, in the Gita itself, Arjuna will be referred to as Partha. Now that's the Sanskrit grammatical rule. A son of Pritha becomes Partha. Krishna himself, his father's name was Vasudeva. He is the son of Vasudeva, so Krishna's name becomes Vasudeva. So these are all grammatical rules by which the children can be identified in some way with the name of their mother or father. More examples will come in due course, and that time we will take a look at them. So cast off this mean faint-heartedness and arise. And he's reminding him, O scorcher of thine enemies, you have scorched your enemies in the past. And when did this faint-heartedness come? The word hridaya daurbalyam, faint-heartedness, it's actually a manifestation of the ego. It's not simply, because Arjuna really is not afraid here in that sense. He is brave. He knows he is going to win the battle. He has confidence in himself. But his heart has become faint, so to speak, because of that ego has come. Oh, I'm the one who is going to kill these people, and how can I do it? It would be wrong on my part to do it. So there is a lot of this I. These are my people, and therefore I can't do it. So speaking of my people, let me just mention a few of the incidents. Earlier on in the Mahabharata, Drona, who is now on the opposite side, was a teacher. He taught all these Kauravas, both these sets of cousins. He taught them archery and all of these art of fighting. And there is this tradition that at the end of the teaching, a student is supposed to, they didn't call it a tuition fee, but the way they used to call it was dakshina, guru dakshina. a form of an offering a student made to the teacher, and that was considered only after that the education became complete. And so, at that offering that Arjuna made to Drona at the end of his training, Drona and Bhishma, remember, they are on the wrong side of the battle here. Exceptionally great people. They were very pure. They were wonderful, amazing people. And so they could see what was to come in the future. Drona knew, reading the tea leaves, if you like, we knew that a time is going to come. These cousins are going to fight. There is going to be a war. He could see that he is going to be on the other side. And so Drona said, as a part of his Guru Dakshina, he asks Arjuna that if at any time in the future, if I am the one on the opposite side in your battle, then, and if I pick up arms against you, you should not hesitate to take up arms and fight with me. That's what his teacher demanded, that if I pick up arms against you, you should not say, oh, you are my teacher, I won't do it. And then Arjuna gives him promise, yes, I will do it. And of course, as you'll see in a subsequent verse, he said, how can I kill Bhishma? How can I kill Drona? So something that he has agreed to do, he is refusing to do. On the other hand, it just shows human beings in general, including every one of us, we are not consistent in life. Yes, we might all say we all have our principles, but we do make exceptions. Sometimes consciously, oftentimes unconsciously. And we'll always have some justification for that. So there is this incident in the Mahabharata again. So a lot of times, one thing about the Gita is this. Either you can look at this text, and it is a part of the larger book, Mahabharata. So you can study some of these finer points in it with reference to the other events which are not mentioned in the Gita, but are a part of the Mahabharata. Or it's also possible to study this book taking it out of the historical context. Because clearly, the teachings given here about the Atman, about the afterlife, about the fundamental questions about life and its purpose, they don't necessarily depend on history, don't necessarily depend on the rest of the story. So it's possible to study Gita without reference to all these other stories that we have. But it's also possible to kind of fall back and look at some of it. Not all of us have read the entire Mahabharata. I haven't read it either. But I have kind of had an opportunity to read at these different incidents at different points. So I never really sat through and read through all these 100,000 verses. I haven't done that. But it's interesting, some of these things that we can point to. And one of the things here is this. In the battle, this battle, where the Gita is held, it does occur that Karna, who is really the eldest Pandava really, but he's on the other side, he comes face to face with Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, does not know that Karna is his brother, his older brother. Karna knows that he is his younger brother. So Karna knows their real relationship. Yudhishthira doesn't know. And they are now facing each other in battle. If Karna wanted, he could have killed Yudhishthira. But because he knows he's after all my kid brother, Karna just kind of lets him go. Now, for a Kshatriya, that's extremely humiliating. Sometimes they would have preferred to die in the battlefield fighting than kind of being shown by compassion from the opposite side. That, okay, I'll let go. So Yudhishthira he doesn't die of it because he wasn't killed by Karna. At the end of the day, in those days, unlike today, when people go and bomb in the middle of the night when people are asleep, that was not how those battles were fought. They did not begin before sunrise. So it was only between sunrise and sunset. And after that, everyone returned to their camps. In fact, there are incidents mentioned in books that after sunset, they would, even these soldiers on site, could even want to walk over to the other side, maybe have dinner together, have some chat. They could still have a friendly talk and recognize next morning they'll be fighting against each other again, maybe saying, nothing personal, just business. For many soldiers, that probably was true. Not everyone is thinking in terms of dharma. For many of these rank and file soldiers, it is their livelihood, which is true even today, even in all the armed forces. Surely, yeah, there is an element of patriotism, fighting for the country, but we also know that everyone who joins the armed forces doesn't necessarily go only by patriotism. Many do, yes. But there are also, if that was enough, there would not have been any necessity for them to provide other incentives to encourage people to join the armed forces. So we do know that many of them, either economic reasons or whatever, are kind of, there is no draft. People don't have to join, but sometimes circumstances or the benefits they might get as a result of joining may want people to go and join the armed forces. And which was as much true now as it was then. Because again, everyone has a family, everyone has responsibilities. You need a way to provide for your family. And if by joining an army gives you that provision that you can carry out your responsibility, people will do so. And so we read stories about after sunset, how even people might go on the other camp, have a chat, and then come back, return, and next morning get ready to fight again. So that evening, after Yudhishthir was kind of let go by Karna, he is furious. And so when Krishna and Arjuna go to Yudhishthir, Yudhishthir is so humiliated. So he kind of, in that frustration, I don't have details of what he told Arjuna, at least we can guess. He might have told Arjuna, you should have done something. Why didn't you come? Or I don't know what he said. But in that fit of anger and frustration, he not only berated Arjuna, his younger brother, but also, like, what is the use of this? The Arjuna's bow and arrow, the bows, was called Gandiva. That's the name that comes in the first chapter also. And so he just also insult. What's the use of this big bow that you are carrying, this Gandiva, and you couldn't protect me? Now, Arjuna had taken a vow when he was given that bow, was that if anyone insults this bow of mine, then I'm going to kill him. And now Arjuna remembers, oh, that's the vow I've taken. And this, my eldest brother now is insulting it. He actually takes up. He says, I have to hold on to my words, the promise I made. And then, of course, Krishna just always, without Krishna, what these people would have done, I don't know. Krishna then says, wait a minute, you gone crazy or what? He's fighting for dharma. This is wrong. You shouldn't do it. And so on. And I just mentioned this to show. So here is this one promise that Arjuna made to himself, that whoever insults this bow of mine, I'm just going to now kill him. And he's ready to do that and ready to fulfill that promise. But the other promise he has made to Drona, that if you take up arms against him, I will take arms against you, he has forgotten that. And that's what I mean by being inconsistent in our lives. A lot of time we might say, oh, this is what I decided to do. So if we want to do something, we'll say, this is what I decided to do, and I am going to do it. If we don't want to do something, We'd say, yeah, I decided to do that, but A, B, C, D, these are the reasons I just can't do it. So that's the tricky part. The mind, and that's when, again, the Gita will point out later. The mind can be our friend, the mind can be our enemy. And the mind becomes our own enemy when it tries to tell us always, you are right. This happened because of this reason, this happened because, so you are just fine. And that's not what good friends do. Real friends, if we do some mistake, it's true. And that's true with all of us. None of us wants to be told you're doing something stupid. Even if we are doing something stupid, to have someone tell us we are doing something stupid, we don't like it. We may not show it always, but we don't like it. And therefore, most people, even if they see you're doing something stupid, will not tell you. Because they say, well, what's the point? I'll just lose a friend. You're just going to get upset. You're going to get angry. But a true friend, a real friend, a friend who truly loves you, if you're doing something stupid, that real friend will say, you're doing something stupid. You're crazy. You might get angry. You might go to beat that friend. But that friend loves you. And I think every one of us in life, we need at least one or two such people in our lives. If we are doing some mistake, who can come and tell us you're doing a mistake. When we are very young, that problem is solved largely because usually we have the elders in the family. So usually parents or the other elders in the family won't hesitate to tell their kid, you're wrong, stupid. And we may not always like it, especially when we are teenagers, being told we are doing something wrong. But they'll nevertheless tell us because they feel they love us and they feel. So in some sense, the elders in the family, those who love us and nourish us and take care of us, they are our friends at some point. But as we get older, the elders are not going to be around all the time. A time will come when we will become elders ourselves. And then there may not be anyone above us to tell us we are stupid. On the other hand, if we still keep on doing stupid things, then most people will just laugh behind our back. Or if we get upset at every time some mistake is pointed out, then people, even if good, well-meaning people, even people who like us, may not say, oh, this person doesn't like it. And therefore, I think it's a good idea to have at least one or two real, we don't have to have these kind of an illusion people have with social media, so many people following me, etc. That's an illusion, that's rubbish. Real friends, not just somebody who just likes you and over online or something like that. It's good to have, as far as we can, some real friends. And that's essentially, how did I go there now? I went to digressed it so much. Anyone remembers how did that happen? Krishna telling Arjuna. So the language that Krishna uses here to Arjuna, as I said, no one else would have dared to say that to him. But Krishna loves Arjuna. He doesn't care whether Arjuna is going to hate him back or not. But this is what is needed right now. So these two verses, Swami Vivekananda, I'm going to read out to you what he said. It's a fairly long quote. But he said that, and this might seem like an exaggeration, but he said, if we can understand these two verses fully, reflect on it, meditate on it, these two verses contain the gist of the entire Gita. Krishna's main teaching hasn't even started yet. This is just the initial scolding. That Swamiji said that if we can understand these two verses, we get the real impact of the Gita. So let me read out to you his own words. In the shlokas beginning with Tam Tatha Kripaya Vishtam. Yeah, just the beginning. The verses 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of the 2nd chapter. How poetically, these are Swamiji's words, how poetically, how beautifully has Arjuna's real position been painted. Then Sri Krishna advises Arjuna, and in the words, Klaibhyam Asma Gamav Partha, etc., why is he goading Arjuna to fight? Because it was not that the disinclination of Arjuna to fight arose out of the overwhelming predominance of pure sattva. It was all tamas that brought on this unwillingness. The nature of a person of sattva guna is that he is equally calm in all situations in life, whether it be prosperity or adversity. But Arjuna was afraid. He was overwhelmed with pity. That he had the instinct and the inclination to fight is proved by the simple fact that he came to the battlefield with no other purpose than that. Frequently, in our lives also, such things are seen to happen. Many people think they are sattvic by nature, but they are really nothing but tamasic. And this is important because when we read about the role of gunas in our lives, who wouldn't like to think, oh, I'm all sattva? But sometimes tamas can masquerade as sattva. Sometimes, as they say, extremes are alike. And so someone is in deep samadhi, that person also will be simply there without any reaction because they're in the highest superconscious state. And someone who is like stoned or just half asleep, that person also is extremely calm, not reacting to anything. Both of them are not reacting, but they are on the opposite sides of the pole. And that's what Swamiji is mentioning here. Many people think they are sattvic by nature, but they are really nothing but tamasic. Many living in uncleanly way regard themselves as paramahamsas. Why? Because the Shastras say that paramahamsas live like one inert or mad or like an unclean spirit. Paramahamsas are compared to children, but here it should be understood that the comparison is one-sided. The Paramahamsa and the child are not one and non-different. They only appear similar, being the two extreme poles as it were. One has reached to a state of beyond jnana, and the other has not even an inkling of jnana, that is knowledge. The quickest and gentlest vibration of light are both beyond the reach of our ordinary vision. But in the one it is intense heat, and in the other it may be said to be almost without any heat. So it is with the opposite qualities of sattva and tamas. They seem in some respects to be the same, no doubt, but there is a world of difference between them. The tamoguna loves very much to array itself in the garb of the sattva. Here, in Arjuna, the mighty warrior, he has come under the guise of daya. So, it is tamas in Arjuna that took the form of pity. If tamas comes in the form of tamas, it's easy to know. But if they change the garb, you will not know. You see in the Ramayana, when Ravana comes to Sita, if he had come as Ravana, of course Sita wouldn't have gone. But he just comes as a mendicant, asking for alms. He comes in a different guise, and Sita is not able to recognize him. So, tamas can come in our life, but not as tamas. It can come in the form of compassion, and we'll say, compassion is of course a nice thing. Who doesn't want to be compassionate? But we need to look at these apparently good things and ask, is this compassion that I have, is it really come from sattva or something else? Because sometimes our even desire to do good things may not necessarily spring from sattva. Because sometimes people can be very ostentatious. They want to do good things to get recognition or power. So they are doing something good, but it's really that impulse to do good is coming from rajas, not from sattva. So we need to look deeply into the real character of these impulses in our heart. So we'll continue with Swamiji. In order to remove this delusion which has overtaken Arjuna, what did Krishna say? As I always preach that you should not decry a person by calling him a sinner, but that you should draw his attention to the omnipotent power that is in him, in the same way does Krishna speak to Arjuna. Naitadvai upapadyate, it does not befit you. Thou art Atman imperishable, beyond all evil. Having forgotten your real nature, you have, by thinking yourself a sinner, as one afflicted with bodily evils and mental grief, you have made yourself so. This does not befit you. So says Krishna. Klaibhyam asma gamav partha. Yield not to unmanliness, O son of Pritha. There is in the world neither sin nor misery, neither disease nor grief. If there is anything in the world which can be called sin, it is this, fear. Know that any work which brings out the latent power in you is punya or virtue, and that which makes the body and the mind weak is sin. Shake off this weakness, this faint-heartedness. You are a hero, a veera. This is unbecoming of you. And then Swamiji continues, if you, my sons, can proclaim this message to the world, Klaibhyam asma gamav partha naitatva upapadyate, then all this disease, grief, sin, and sorrow will vanish from off the face of the earth in 3 days. All these ideas of weakness will be nowhere. Now it is everywhere, this current of the vibration of fear. Reverse the current, bring in the opposite vibration, and behold the magic transformation. You are omnipotent. Go to the mouth of the cannon, fear not. Hate not the most abject sinner, look not to his exterior. Turn thy gaze inward, where resides the Paramatma. Proclaim to the whole world with trumpet voice, there is no sin in you, there is no misery in you. You are the reservoir of omnipotent power. Arise, awake, and manifest the divinity within. If one reads this one shloka, this is what I was referring to. Klaibhyam asma gamav partha, naitatvai upapadyate, kshudram hridaya daurbalyam, tyaktvottishta parantapa. One gets all the merits of reading the entire Gita, for in this one shloka lies embedded the whole message of the Gita. So there is a lot to unpack here as we think about this shloka. And it may be good to just, if you want, you can, if you like it, you can even read this one shloka at least every day. And we can look at ourselves and see what are the things my mind holds to be true and real. What are the values and principles I have in my life? What are the kind of commitments and duties and responsibilities I have in my life? And how I'm living up to them. Whether I keep making excuses for the things I ought to do and I'm not doing. Whether all the time I'm not able to live up to my own principles. Am I strong enough, brave enough, honest enough to then tell myself, I'm not living up to it? Or does my mind somehow find an excuse? Because nowadays we do speak about self-esteem. And that's true. Self-esteem is important. But somehow, there is the word self in self-esteem. So, where are we going to search for that esteem in the self? And if my idea of the self is just this body and mind, most people think about as self as such, then that self-esteem can sometimes not be so helpful. When sometimes we see nowadays, and I think there is a good reason, as I said, when children are growing up, to kind of let them have a positive self-image. And that's good, that's important. But if we keep on telling children, yes, when they are very young, it may not be possible to explain these things to them. But as the child keeps on growing, to not having to tell every time, and I think parents, grandparents, teachers often have to face this situation, that no matter what the child has done, oh, this is lovely, you are awesome, you are wonderful. Then we might think that we are kind of giving them a positive self-image, making them feel good. And as I said, that is not bad in itself, but at some point, at some stage of their lives, it will be good to prepare them for life as it is, in the sense that, yes, sometimes they are not going to be awesome all the time. Not everything they do is going to be perfect. So it's good to point out, no, that's wrong. It's possible that they may not always be the best in everything. If we can, as elders, if we can do that to the next generation, actually we'll be preparing them better, making them stronger to deal with life as it comes when they grow up even more. Because otherwise, and I see that all the time now when I meet with students here who are in colleges and both at the graduate level and postgraduate level, especially when they first come to college as freshmen, etc., some of them are not able to, even with such reputed schools like Harvard and MIT, some of them, they're really good, but they may not be the best in everything, because really, the bests from many places have all come together in one place. And so, if they have never been prepared in some way to be the second best, or not do so well in everything, they will be able to handle that in a better way than if they are not prepared for it. And so we have to be, and again, it's not just about telling the younger generation. We can tell the younger generation, and that would seem authentic only if we have learned to tell that to ourselves. And so we need to then, as people who have adults at different stages of adulthood, look in our own heart and say, yes, these are the ideals I hold dear. This is what I feel is perfect. This is the ideal. But in my life, the way I think, the way I do things, how much am I able to measure up to my own ideals? And not feel ashamed if we don't measure it up. And of course, we are not going to measure it up. If we measure it up fully, we would already be enlightened. So the fact that we are not enlightened yet means there's something lacking. And so we have the humility to say, yes, this is the ideal I hold on to. This is what I believe is right. And still I'm a work in progress. But recognizing where we lack, where we fall back, that is important. Only because first, there is always going to be the right diagnosis before we can decide then how to fix the problem. If we just deny the problem, we'll never be able to fix it. And therefore, before we even take it upon ourselves to tell others, just like Krishna told Arjuna, we have to say these words to ourselves. that this kind of faint-heartedness should not come in our own life. But sometimes people feel, experiencing oneness. So either the other extreme is, this is so tough and I'm so far behind. I'm never going to realize this in this life. God knows, maybe in some future life I will do it. That's faint-heartedness. Because it's just like I'm giving it up. I'm giving up and saying, oh no, I'm not going to do it. So we have to be strong. We have to acknowledge that we are struggling. We have to acknowledge where we lack, but never give up hope. Never feel like, in order just being honest, I'm going to think nothing is going to happen in this life. That's not honesty. That's giving up. So that's the tricky thing. We have to be honest with where we are, but also be positive that yes, through God's grace, through Krishna's grace, through Mother's grace, I can achieve it. Or the grace will help me, because grace can come to any of us anytime. We don't have to depend only on self-effort, but if we don't do the self-effort, then even if the grace comes, we won't even be able to recognize it. So a lot to think here. So we will stop here today. If you have any thoughts or ideas, feel free to share.
Hariam Swamiji. Swamiji, how can we train ourselves to become that friend of ourselves as Arjuna was to Krishna? Sorry, as Krishna was to Arjuna. As you mentioned.
Yeah, good. One of the things is clearly complete honesty. Honesty with one's own self. Because often we recognize honesty as a virtue, but sometimes we just apply being honest with other people. But first, even before we are honest with other people, we have to be honest with ourselves, which really means not justifying anything and everything. That recognizing that all of us have strengths and all of us have weaknesses. A good spiritual seeker will be able to identify these are the strengths I have, and every one of us has them. And these are the weaknesses I have. And if we can, as objectively as possible, identify them, then going forward, decision making becomes easier. Because essentially then, it means I should do everything that will help me preserve my strength and eliminate my weaknesses. And so the self-appraisal, self-examination is very important. As I think, who was it who said, an unexamined life is not worth living or something?
Socrates.
Huh? Socrates, an unexamined life is not worth living. Is that the word? I think that's so much truth in that one. And so you see, these basic truths don't necessarily have to come only from the Gita or the Upanishad. There is no historical evidence to know Socrates had ever studied Vedanta. We know Aristotle, when Alexander, who was a student, did go to that part. And so there is some way some scholars have pointed out how some of the influence of these Eastern thought entered into Plato and others when Alexander went. But there is no really any evidence about Socrates knowing it. But the idea is, truth is universal. It's not monopolized by some book or some tradition. And so Socrates, an amazing person, the wisest person, as the Oracle of Delphi pointed out, he had the same idea, an unexamined life. So self-examination is very important. And I think that kind of a self-examination will help my mind become a true friend of my own. Yeah. Until my mind becomes my friend, we need some external good friends to tell us when we are wrong. And one thing, a good practical advice. If anyone corrects you, anytime, don't get upset. Don't get angry. It's possible. I'm not suggesting that every time somebody corrects you, you have done something wrong. It's possible that somebody is correcting you and you have not done anything wrong. It's possible. Sometimes not everyone who's correcting are kind of always necessarily right. But don't get upset. If someone corrects you, you just look, examine, and say, did I really do something wrong? And if you have done something wrong, then be grateful that there's somebody who showed you what is right, so that you have become a little bit wiser, that you won't make that mistake again. So be grateful. But even if you have not done anything wrong, rather than telling, I haven't done anything wrong, blah, 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 that's ego. That's ego coming up. But if you haven't done anything wrong, then that's fine. You just listen to it and smile and be thankful. And I said this because maybe this time you haven't done anything wrong. But next time, if you have done something really wrong, and if you are still grateful to this person, that person will next time come and tell you. But if the first time I becomes defensive and say I haven't done anything, next time onward these people will not correct you and they just laugh behind your back and make fun of you. And so whenever anybody corrects us, whether that correction is justified or not, be grateful. It may not come easily, may not come naturally, but it's a very pragmatic advice. Think about it. I have found it very helpful. So, yes. Mahendra, yeah.
So, Swamiji, you said about the friend being next to you, and so Arjuna never actually had Krishna as a guru. He was always, both of them were friends. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about Swamiji was also a sort of, you see in some of the books, in the volumes, that 8th and 9th and so forth, where he tells Brahmananda and Turyananda very bluntly about some of the things that they should be doing. Mm-hmm. So, what is better to be next to you, a guru or a friend, to tell you the right thing to do?
Yeah, good question. The two are not necessarily separate things. I mean, sometimes friends are just friends and guru is a guru. But sometimes guru can be, and usually can be one of one's own best friend. Although we may not look upon the guru as a friend, but all the things we expect in a friend to help us, to concern for us, those qualities guru has. So they are not like completely exclusive of each other. And in Arjuna's case, yes, you're right. They were cousins, they were more or less of the same age. And for a long time, he just saw him as a cousin. The beauty about Krishna's life is that all of these other characters in the Mahabharata, including Bhishma and others who were much older than Krishna, they were aware of their different relationships. Oh, he's a cousin, he's a grandnephew, or so on. But there was something about Krishna that even when they saw him as in these relationships, they also knew he was something special. Nobody could kind of exactly say, oh, you are divine, you are Paramatma. They never said that. But they knew he wasn't like everybody. So throughout Mahabharata, the interesting thing is, throughout a lot of times, these people will go and do pranam, bow down to these elders. And all these Pandavas have gone and done that to Bhishma, who was their grandfather. Whenever Krishna would also go and do that, and usually they will not allow Krishna, or usually when they will also fold their hands. That's the description we find. So it's never put so bluntly that, oh, they saw him as God or anything. But there is this kind of an awareness. In and through this, they knew that he was something special. So in the 11th chapter of the Gita, when this cosmic form is revealed to Arjuna, he is so terrified. He just says, oh, please forgive me. All this time I saw you, Sakha, as my friend, as this thing, and now I know you're something big. So yeah, that revelation comes. Interestingly also, when he sees that big form of Krishna, a distance gets created. Because suddenly he realizes, oh, you are this infinite one. And he asks for forgiveness and all of that. So in other words, when he saw Krishna as a friend, he somehow seemed much more closer than Krishna as this infinite reality. Yeah. And that's why, I mean, again, we'll get into all of this later on in the book about why the personal ideal often seems more relatable. It's fine to say, oh, Brahman is everywhere, I'm that infinite consciousness. Good, kind of feels good, but you cannot you don't feel that sense of connection with consciousness. You can get immersed into that, and I'm sure that's the highest state, no doubt about it. But still, if one falls in love with a beautiful Krishna or a Rama or Ramakrishna, that feeling, that kind of a connection, many people are able to feel that better with a personal ideal than this impersonal, big, cosmic reality. In fact, in the Madhusudan Saraswati is the great teacher in the Shankara tradition, Advaita tradition. He wrote a commentary on the Gita, and there is one verse in that. So he's a non-dualist. But then he says, after having experienced that oneness everywhere, and then you look at this beauty of Krishna, and then he says, Sa Advaitatapi Sundaram, that once you have experienced oneness, you know the ultimate reality is Brahman, and then you look at this beautiful face of Krishna, which is even more beautiful than non-duality. Again, at that point, all the kind of conflicts you and I have about personal or impersonal, jnana or bhakti, knowledge or devotion, all those contradictions have been resolved. So it's possible to be a complete non-dualist and yet be filled with that beauty of Krishna's face. We see that in the case of Ramakrishna himself. 6 months he was immersed in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in that oneness. And yet, when his mind did come to this plane, he could never, everywhere he saw the beauty of the Divine Mother, of Mother Kali. He didn't simply say, oh, it's all infinite now, so I don't care for Mother Kali. So these contradictions get resolved. These contradictions exist in us right now because we have experienced neither this nor that. But once we experience either one of these, then we find that which appears as personal is impersonal. That which appears as impersonal is personal. Because the ultimate reality is neither personal nor impersonal. The ultimate reality is beyond even the ideas of the personal and impersonal. So it's a beautiful state. Yeah.
So you said something about knowing one's strengths and weaknesses. So what if one's primary weakness is an preponderance of doubt and mistrust of one's own convictions and mistrust of others' advice, skepticism? From that perspective, how does one accept a guru or a friend or build devotion or have any conviction about one's own spirituality if that is the weakness?
Yeah.
It seems kind of like a trap, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. That's why the 3 steps that are mentioned in Vedanta practice, they're called Shravana, Manana, Nitidhyasana. Hearing the truth, Manana is reflecting on the truth, Nitidhyasana is meditating on it. And we might say, why are there these 3 steps? So the first step, hearing, kind of makes us aware of what the reality is. That you read it from a book, or you hear it from a teacher, or you hear it from different sources. But then there are these 2, the first doubt, the doubt that you said, the first hurdle, you might say, is called samshaya. And samshaya is doubt. That this is what the books are saying, but how can I be sure that's what they are saying? Or how is this possible? If it is one, how did it become many? If it is beyond form, How can it acquire form? Now, these kind of questions, then we need to reflect on it. So this prolonged state of reflection, manana, is what is needed to overcome this doubt about many things. Now, sometimes many of the doubts may be resolved intellectually, and yet we find, yeah, I don't have any doubt now, but still, I'm still seeing the world, I'm still seeing the many. So that's called viparyaya. Or asambhavana means it's something that seems impossible, but that's still I'm experiencing it. Then you go to the third stage called nididhyasana, you then meditate on it. Now, all people don't necessarily have to go through all the three steps. And so what the book says that if the student is ready for that highest realization, as soon as the teacher says, Tattvamasi, you are the infinite one, no reflection needed, no meditation needed, at when the student says, Aham Brahmasmi, the problem solved. But as soon as you hear these teachings or read about it, then these questions come and doubts come, then we need to keep on reflecting on it. Doubts go away, we still are experiencing this, then meditate on it. So yes, and doubt is probably one of the first hurdles every one of us experiences, doubts of different kinds. And therefore, it's good to express the doubt and try to find answers to them through our own reflection or through any external help. Because otherwise, they are not just going to go away on their own. There has something that we have to take a proactive role in removing these doubts. In fact, in the Gita again, a lot of what we are saying, we will find in the Gita, one time or the other, it will come up. Krishna gives such a comprehensive treatment here. So he says, in fact, it's quite a depressing statement really, that samshayatma vinashyati, a doubting person ultimately is destroyed. And that's why, yes, we all have doubts, but we should be striving hard to try to remove those doubts through constant reflection and study and any other sources. Because if we don't do anything about it, then vinashyati here, destroyed, really means I'm going to keep on revolving in this circle. I'm not going to get out of the circle. If I want to be enlightened, then the doubts have to be removed. Not simply through once a week, 1 hour class. Yes, I mean, we're doing the best we can here. But this has to somehow be working somewhere at the back of the mind. I know all of us have a lot of things to attend to. We have lots of duties and all of that. Accepted. But we know if something important is weighing on our mind, we go about doing all the work that needs to be done, but we still, somewhere in the corner of the mind, it will still be going on. So this thing, anything that we are reading and studying, if something doesn't make sense, it should at some corner of the heart, it should keep on revolving in the mind somewhere. That's the kind of a reflection. And then when you have some respite, when you are a little bit free, then you can sit and put your whole mind there. Other times, let a part of your mind keep on working on it. That's the only way.
Thank you, Swamiji. This may be related to the previous question. What got me thinking was about this idea of inconsistency in human beings as to how they do not really act consistent to their own ideals or thoughts. And the one way which I can think of it is to think of it as a tension between sattva and tamas. But what would be a good way to think of it as a pointer going forward in life, in the sense that something which you can understand that you're not being consistent and how to kind of pay attention to that on a daily basis?
Yeah, good. Please sit down. Yeah, one thing we have to be clear, according to context, according to situation, the application of some of these things will not be identical. So just because we have decided to do or say something in one way, and we find that in a certain situation we may not or be doing it the way we thought, sometimes the situation itself might be such. So I'm not saying that there's no justification at all. Sometimes the justification may be justified, but we don't have to justify just in order to feel good that I haven't done anything. So that's the kind of being, not having any place for self-deception in our life. Because most of us are good people. We don't go about deceiving other people. But sometimes, unconsciously, we might be deceiving ourselves. Not consciously. It's very difficult. I mean, if we consciously are deceiving ourselves, there is no hope for us. But unconsciously, just to kind of feel, oh no, this is the reason. And that time we have to be honest and say, is that justification in the right way of justifying it, or I'm just kind of making excuses for myself? And so self-examination is not that easy, because sometimes people can either put themselves much down than they are, or kind of bloat their CV a little bit. We don't need to do either. But just one final thought before we close, it's already late. Egoistic people who have very strong ego, they are not good at self-examination. So if we want to know ourselves better, then a little bit of objectivity is needed. And that objectivity can come, there is a little bit of a loosening of the ego. So oftentimes we are better at judging other people, not so good at judging ourselves, because we are not able to objectify ourselves. And that objectification can occur only if there is a little bit of... And then one simple way to do that is not to take ourselves too seriously. Because if you take ourselves too seriously, then it becomes very difficult. So hold it a little bit lightly. Say that I may be the greatest fool in the universe. And sometimes they say, it might be good to just say, everyone around me in the world are enlightened beings. I'm the only one who is not enlightened. Try it out. It sometimes works. Because this ego, oh, I know more than people, I'm this, doesn't help. So we'll keep on, these ideas will come up, and I'm sure there's a lot that we all can learn together as we go ahead. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhum.